too. What is going on? Where's my fucking logo? Dear Lord. I don't like the people to mess with my settings. Oh shit. Probably should start the show.
Turn it down to a starry night. Intergalactic light so bright. Dakota show so out of sight. Blast off now, take flight. Aliens and rockin' tunes. Country beats under the moons. Space dust in my boots all new. Gigolo's hosting soon. Welcome to the galaxy. Radio waves so wild and free. Tune and feel the energy. With Dakota ride the beat. When it's into every song.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Dakota Franson. I am the one, the only intergalactic Gigolo. How is everyone doing this fine day? Well, at the time I'm recording this, I'm on a 5-day weekend. I spent some time catching up on some of the fun projects, spent a little time with family, just living life the best I can with what I got, you know what I mean? And that's all we can really do, especially with all this insanity that's going on. First off, to the audience that have listened, it's Gigolo, not Gigolo, as my sister thought it was pronounced. And to the gentleman who was asking, what about the wife and kids? The wife was the one who helped inspire this idea. Oh, that crazy woman of mine. I don't know. Probably wouldn't get my ass in gear had she not come into my life when she did. Finally decided to show herself. So some of y'all were probably wondering, what's the story? You know, what's with the title card, if you will? Well, the story itself is a little complex. Those of you who had followed for a while already have a pretty good clue. But the title card was a joke about the fact that technically, through the madness that is extraterrestrial intervention, time travel, my life in the supernatural, and the fact that I'm apparently a lot more charming to the fair sex than I thought I was, technically, those multiple women all represent the same woman. All those women you see with me in the title card, the same woman if you look carefully at the face. Because I've been with multiple of the same one in the same lifetime. It is very weird. I don't even think I could put it down into a book on just how mind-boggling the situation is. But like I said, there is a book coming for those of you who have been wanting me to write about my experiences with the supernatural, especially when you found out about my connection to Elena Danaan through Thorhan Iridian. The book is coming. It is almost completed in its first draft. There'll be somewhat of a different approach than what everybody else has done. So, for those of you who don't know, a few years back, I started up a little project. You know, you hear a lot about, confronting your inner child, comforting, situations that they weren't appropriately taken care of back then. Say you had some shit go down when you were a kid, you're obviously at a point you're not ready to process what all had happened. So certain things start coming forward, certain personality traits start to take hold when you go into adulthood as a response to that. Because, for lack of a better word, that inner child, the adult you became, is trying to prevent what happened to that inner child. So if you actually undergone some issues in life as a kid, chances are some of the personality quirks that you have as an adult are a response to that. So I started up a little project called it Dear Coda, where I would write a book, but instead of like just a traditional, telling my life story, I would write letters to my younger self, to key points in my life that where obviously things have changed. Up until recently, I hadn't really given much attention to the extraterrestrial side of things because, quite frankly, I wasn't at a point where I understood it. Now I'm starting to get to that point, or at least I think I am. But nevertheless, I'm starting to get to that point where I'm able to process things, and some of the storylines, for lack of a better word, that started up was when I was a young kid, have finally started to come to a close. Speaking of which, this sort of bleeds into the Franson Files episodes that I had promised. If you follow any of the social media pages for Bald and Bonkers or for myself under Specialist of the Strange. See, I don't believe in making a channel for this aspect of myself or that aspect of myself. No, it's all humanity is not under human beings are not two-dimensional creatures that only exist on the whatever flat surface you're listening to this show from. No, we're a lot more complex than that. We're not even 3D, or 4D. They say that the human mind can make neurological connections up until within the 12th mathematical dimension. Now, I know there's probably going to be some people that say, oh, it's density, oh, it's dimension. Speaking from a mathematical perspective, apparently the human brain can start making neurological connections up until the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th dimensions. Just how interconnected it becomes, which in itself essentially becomes where God becomes possible, where anything and everything becomes possible. Now, this is not exactly terminology you would see in mainstream science, but it is the concept where multiverse comes into play, where anything happens, and if there is a being that exists within this space, then they would quite literally be capable of achieving and doing anything with just a mere thought. Wouldn't that be kind of cool? But anyway, as I was saying, the Franson Files episodes. For those, I want to dedicate a little bit more production time. You see, for Intergalactic Gigolo, I can just sit here, BS, talk about what's been going on lately. Maybe do a little, product placements, a little endorsements for all the little affiliate links I have up. Maybe recommend you to go to the merch shops and all that fun stuff. But for Franson Files, that's going to take a lot more care, a lot more work, a lot more production, and I'm a one-man wrecking crew. Maybe here in the near future we can settle that, but I want to make sure that anybody who goes to help me, I can make sure they're appropriately compensated, because I see a lot of instances where people try to start up businesses around paranormal concepts, and there gets to be a point where, and I may be completely misreading this, but it gets to be a point where it seems like they take advantage of individuals who have disabilities in order to get free labor. They even get to the point where the workplace environment, for lack of a better word, gets to be a bit abusive. And that's not right. Now, granted, a lot of these individuals who may be doing this, who have disabilities, they're doing it for the simple sake of just having something to do. And, I get that. People say, oh, Dakota, you should relax. You should vacation more. Well, yeah, I probably should. But trust me, every time I've gone on a major trip or even just a little jaunt down the road, something always freaking draws me into action. Franson Files. One of the little tidbits I teased was potential connections to Nazi Germany. Going back to Miss Elena Danaan, dear Lord, the number of times that woman has swept in and provided just that little tiny piece of information I was missing to piece together what I was trying to figure out. It astounds me. So what's the connection you're probably wondering about? Well, you see, before my time with the Galactic Federation, I was part of the Dark Fleet. I was Tal Shiar. I was a soldier with them, and if you followed my videos for a while, you know that there was a point where I basically broke free, took out a high-ranking Seeker who was about to literally devour small children, and had to make a run for it. That's the very overdone, oversimplified version of it. But here's one thing that got to me in that regard. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but just follow with me here. I know I can be a little bit scatterbrained. It's part of the reason why I pre-record this. But anyway, in regards to my situation, right? Here's my thought process. The tall, Tall, and I know there's probably going to be some of you who are going to be confused about what the hell am I talking about. Read up on Elena Danaan's books. I'll see if I can put in some links in the description to get a hold of her books so you know what I'm talking about. I understand if you're skeptical of her, I encourage anybody to be skeptical of just about any claims out there, but also be investigated. Don't just toss it aside just because you don't understand it or it sounds completely out there. Just think about all the insanity that's happened within the last 5 years. All right. We've been shown that a lot of things that we all thought once was impossible are in fact possible. And we're going to see a hell of a lot more of that. So check the links in the description for some of Elena Danaan's books. They will likely be Amazon associate links. With here, I am legally obligated to state that there may be a small commission that Bald and Bonkers does earn from every sale if you decide to purchase one from those links. But that does not affect the price. That's not going to steal anything away from Elena, as is my understanding of how it should be. Admittingly, Amazon's done some shady stuff. So if information comes where Amazon's being kind of shady about that practice, as soon as it's brought to my attention and we see it's legit, we'll confront it when that time comes. But as I was back to what I was saying, the Tall, the Tall, Tal Shiar, the Talls, they're essentially supposed to be the most human-like extraterrestrials out there. They are essentially just like us on a physical level. They may have a few physical differences, but they're very, and I find it funny that as I Elena, my signal is starting to drop. Well, isn't that interesting? But with this particular race of species, they're supposed to be the most human-like in appearance, right? So, under the logic that their evolution must be very similar to our own, that should indirectly I'm losing track of my words. It is safe to say that we can assume, it would be a safe assumption that their psychology could be very similar to our own. And with that assumption, if you're looking at these particular beings and their motivations, the way their brain, you want to know how their brain works. We already have a baseline of normal human behavior that anybody with a high school level of psychology can be able to understand. Now, obviously, there's a lot more complexity situations behind that, but you get the gist. There is enough similarities between us that we can make safe assumptions about how things are related. And the more we're framing it in ways of how we're alike, potentially in the long run, that could help eliminate any potential prejudice that may come when the grand reveal happens. But I digress. So, my story, where I broke free from the Dark Fleet from the Tal Shiar, then eventually got recruited into the Galactic Federation of Worlds. Historically speaking, no one just flips like that. Normally, in most cases, someone has to build up in order to get to that point. Now, in regards to talking about the Dark Fleet, this is where a lot of conspiracy related subjects, so you may hear me say the word allegedly. This is just for the sake of conversation, just for the sake of getting the conversation going. And with the Dark Fleet, allegedly being the optimal word here, this is just to bring the conversation to neutral ground. When you're talking about the Dark Fleet, you're talking about the Nazi influence, Maria Orsic, right? Now, on a recent interview, I revealed that there was some new information that had come forward about my own background. Specifically, that a photo matching the description of my LGR other half a much younger version at that. A physical photo had potentially been found of what is more or less me from another lifetime, another vessel, however you want to label it, standing right behind Adolf Hitler. Intriguing now, isn't it? And for the couple I've shown the photo to, show the comparison, the rendering of my other self compared to this photo, it's a pretty close match. Now, this does not. This is right now, this is speculation. There is a lot of work to be done to completely validate this story. And I will admit right here, right now, I may have some details wrong. The timing of that photo, it's usually dated around 1930, about 1933, rather, which times a lot of testimony of when the Nazis really started getting into exotic technologies, potentially retrieved from secret societies. This is where Maria Orsic comes in. On her latest Star Nation news, this would be Star Nation. Hold on, I'm literally looking it up as I am speaking. On our latest edition of Star Nation News, Star Nation News 37, July 1st, 2024. I highly encourage people to go check it out if you haven't already. Elena Danaan was to discuss the situation regarding Maria Orsic, where the information she was provided was given to her. How, and for those of you who don't know the story, she was like a psychic medium who received these messages in Sumerian that led to. I'm oversimplifying the story. Please do research, do your own research, use your own discretion. If you don't believe what I'm about to say, that's fine. Let's keep the conversation respectful. But she received this information, and with her associates, she was able to actually start to build anti-gravity machines, flight machines, that eventually got incorporated into the Third Reich, the Nazi regime. And when Maria started to realize what the technology was being used, that essentially she was being used, the Galactic Federation of Worlds helped her get the hell out of Dodge. Now, the beings that she got this information from were not aligned with the good guys. They had an allegiance with some of the darker entities out there. This is where I come in. There was a point where I was a soldier with the Tal Shiar. It was not an espionage mission. This was before I joined the Galactic Federation of Worlds. It was before I was taken onto an envoy. There's this recall when I first started to research her at one point. It's like something triggered a memory. I didn't know where to place it, but now I sure as hell do. Where I was in a mission briefing, a very dark room, potentially on a ship. We were on the move. There were dozens of us that I could recall just off the top of my head. And we were given briefings about essentially infiltrating the Earth. And one of the things that caught my interest was that at one point we were shown what looked like a holographic projection of Maria Orsic, or a woman that looked a lot like her. And while the conversation wasn't in English, it was like I could translate it. It was like a bad dub of a Godzilla movie where you hear the native Japanese, but then you would hear over the top of it the English translation. Essentially, this woman was being used as an implant. They utilized her to plant information about exotic technologies so we can infiltrate. And because the Tal Shiar were very human looking in appearance, we were able to integrate ourselves with the Nazis. And not just for secret space programs either. We integrated ourselves within a lot of their security detail, within their armies. Someone had to keep an eye on what the dumb little monkeys were doing. And in that position, I committed some very horrific crimes. Now, there's a statement that's popularly associated when it comes to the Nazis. We were just doing a job, a way of disassociating ourselves to eliminate the responsibility for what we had done, the fact that none of us stood up. We were just doing a job. Something about my time within that assignment started to get to me. Potentially the fact that I was hurting kids. But at the time, I was able to brush it off as just doing a job. These were inferior beings. We were going to be their masters. They were our little toys to break. I'll go a little bit more in depth in a France and Files episode. Like I said, I want to make sure that when I go to present those, I give it a lot more detail, give it a lot more production value, especially with everything that's unfolded. But there came a point where we withdrew. I was assigned back home, and that's when I almost caught a Sikar trying to kill small children. That's when I snapped. That's when I started to realize that these motherfuckers weren't trying to help us in any way. They weren't trying to help. The allegiance we had with them was complete bullshit. That they were going to turn on us the second they had an opportunity. The second we were no longer of value to them. And that's why when the Nagamuk Namopo joined the Galactic Federation of Worlds, that's why the diplomatic relations with Talihara started to shift in favor of them joining the Galactic Federation, of why they were finally able to break free from the Sikar. When I've talked about this story with a few individuals, some of which who are probably going to see this broadcast, they put it for the idea that how time isn't necessarily linear. It's multi-dimensional in its own right, in a way. An example I've always used was time was fluid. Time was water. It bends to the space and energies that are surrounding it. And while that may be the case, while time in itself maybe bends because of how space travel works and time dilation and all that fancy stuff, there's another aspect to it. That's the linearity of perception itself. Time is relative to the perception and of the observer, right? So like I said, something had to get me to flip. Something had to get me to snap like that in order to break free from Talihara. I believe that was it. And again, in a future episode of France and Files, I'm actually going to start working on that one here very soon. Once I sign off and get this all programmed and ready to go. That's what led me into the Galactic Federation of Worlds. That's what led me to finding my wife. And that's what led me to eventually taking on an envoy and all that. So right there, there's still a linearity to it. Just enough of it to where I can put it all in a timetable. And as I'm writing my next book, which only has a couple more chapters before it's completely finished, so we're right on schedule, you'll see a little bit more of that in there as well, because this was big. This is big information, and there's been people who have said that I probably should not come forward with it for how sensitive of a topic it involves. But you know what? Here's my thought process. While yes, there is the ability to manifest new realities to completely erase things from existence practically, there comes a point where we also have to acknowledge that, again, like I mentioned in the last episode, conflict breeds evolution. We have to remember the lessons of the dark and messed up stuff so that we can make sure it doesn't happen again, so we can just grow and be better. It's as simple as that. That's what life is about. It's about growing. It's about learning. And yeah, I'm putting myself out there and probably going to be putting myself at risk for troll attacks yet again. But something I've noticed about these quote-unquote trolls, most of them don't seem to be very intelligent enough to put together a compelling argument. They're just cherry-picking what may or may not sound like it can be drawn into an argument. They're not actually trying to present counter arguments. They're not trying to appropriately debate, share information. They're just looking to pick a fight. And most of the time, they don't even bother to show their face, or They may try to write something off as, oh, well, something overtook me and all that. Well, maybe there is a psychological thing going on. And if you have blackouts like that where you don't remember, purposely pissing people off, might want to get yourself checked out just in case there's not something wrong in your head. But also at the same time, a lot of these people that are trying to stir up these arguments don't bother to show their face. And yet here I am. They may not directly see my face, but the avatar looks like a very skinny version of me. But we shouldn't let the fear of repercussions inhibit our ability to share the truth. Because the fear of sharing the truth is what the dark forces count on. They count on essentially beating someone into submission, beating them into their silence. And that's going to be the first step. That is always the first step, is to speak out, acknowledge that something is wrong. Then when the time comes, tell the story. Make sure the lessons are reverberated through as much time and space as you possibly can. So hopefully others can learn not to allow those same things to happen again. It's kind of like how they say Nostradamus was trying to warn people of a quote-unquote third Antichrist, even though, historically speaking, he was not exactly a fan of the church's labels. That his prophecies, his warnings, and a lot of the work of Dolores Cannon, just as an example, were attempts to try to isolate who he was and take him out before he can cause too much problems. Now that I'm thinking about it, with the HD, why there's so much attention on the Earth is because some sort of great evil supposedly came from this planet around this time, and in order to prevent the atrocities that it commits on the planet and throughout the galaxy, even in time, that's why all these extraterrestrials came here from roughly 300 years in our relative future. What if that's who they're slowly ironed out? Certainly an interesting thought now, isn't it? Anyway, I think that's all the time we have for today. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to stay tuned to Bald and Bonkers. We're going to have brand new Franson Files episodes with, I figured a nice little episode exploring, the choices of starseeds might be good. A Sasquatch encounter, connections with Nazi Germany, rumors of lost treasure. We got some good stuff coming up. I do believe Chris is going to have more of his tarot cards, though I'm told that he is planning on slowing down a bit just to prevent burnout. So if that's something that piques your interest, go check him out. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe, whatever the case may be on whatever platform you're listening to this from, because there's always going to be more information, and we're going to slowly start bringing in some interviews to help boost some other projects. And remember, Bald and Bonkers is putting together an anthology for people who tell their real life encounters with the supernatural. There will be a link to that as well in the description of this episode. And if you're watching on one of the video platforms, there's the website right there. Do check it out. And if you like to have a one-on-one interview with yours truly, we can make that happen. Much love. Take care. And I'll see you next time. When it's been to every song, jamming all night long.